What is up, guys? I hope that you guys have had a fabulous week. Today, we're going to be talking about how to analyze property for investment. So, there are some key points when we look at property for investment. And today, we're going to be talking about 6 major key points. So, we're going to go an overview of what those 6 key points are. We're going to talk about what are the subpoints for each of those 6 key points when you guys are starting investing in real estate. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and get straight to it. So, we're going to be talking about understanding your investment goals. We're going to be talking about property selection criteria. We're going to be talking about the financial analysis when choosing property for real estate investments. We're going to be talking about due diligence. Then we're going to jump into financing an investment structure. And finally, we're going to be talking about the exit strategy. So if you don't know about any of these, be sure to hit the follow button and the notification bell, because for the next 365 days, we're going to be dropping an amazing video every single day, so you guys can go ahead and grow and learn how to actually invest in real estate and be profitable. So let's go ahead and get straight to it. So the first thing when we look at real estate is we need to understand what are our investment goals. So a lot of people get into the real estate space and they say, oh, I want to make money. I want to make as much money as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. And the issue with that is that is not measurable. And if we want to make money in anything, we need to go ahead and actually take it into measurements. So if we are gonna go ahead and bake a cake, then we need to know that we need 1 cup of flour, half a cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and that is how we make a recipe. And just like how we make a recipe in the kitchen is how we make a recipe for investing. So what is the first thing when we look at understanding our investment goals? Well, it is pretty clear. It is understanding what we want to do. And that gets broken down into 2 parts. There is the short term and then there's the long term. So for the long term, that is, what do I want to achieve over the long course of my investment strategy? What do I want to finish my life with? Do I want to end up owning a couple rental properties? Do I want to end up owning hotels when I'm at my deathbed? Do I want to not own anything and just sit on a bunch of cash when I'm on my deathbed so that, I know I had that. So how do you guys envision yourselves? What do you guys want to have? Now, that is the first key for us getting started in real estate investing. Now, the second one is understanding what are our short-term real estate investment goals, which might be very different from our long-term. And the reason for that is that your financial situation today is not linear. It's probably not going to go in line right now, or you may not see the line for where do you want to end up. So we need to understand, what do we need to change now in the present so that as the years pass by, we can end up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now with that long-term vision in mind. So clarifying our financial objectives is the third key of understanding your investment goal. So what that means is, how much money do I want to make and where do I want to make that money from? So do I want to make it as a recurring monthly income, or do I want to make it from lump sums? So recurring monthly incomes would be either short-term rentals or long-term rentals, or some sort of monthly, quarterly, or yearly incomes where I get disbursement. So that could be any kind of rentals. That's basically it. Or investing in funds, which we're going to leave for another video because that's going to get complicated. And we're just covering the basics for today. So once we understand what we want to do, we are going to be able to understand what asset class within the real estate space is the right one for us. So if we want to end up with a ton of hotels, then our short-term goals should align with those long-term. If you are heavily in debt, then your first goal is finding a way for you to acquire properties either with the debt that you have or clearing the debt while getting experience focused on that hotel management. If you are looking to own shopping centers, then your short-term goals are going to be understanding how do I analyze shopping centers. Those are the short and long-term goals. So if I want to go in and get into hotels or shopping centers or whatever it is, I need to understand how do they work? What are the variables that I must take into account whenever I go into investing in whichever real estate investment asset class I'm going into? And that means where are my incomes coming from? Where are my expenses coming from? What things are there unique versus other types of industries within the real estate space? And a quick example that will make this very clear is if I go into research and development for the pharmaceutical industry, then it is going to be very, very different from warehousing for just a self-storage facility. And the reason for that is both are warehouses. The difference is one is just, just some lock boxes, some keypads, come in, drop your stuff, get out. And it's a very simple business model. However, if we go into the pharmaceutical side, we need to go and look at filtration systems, specialized air conditioning systems. We need to look at specialized fire, turning off fire equipment and systems. We need to look at specialized outlets for power usage because sometimes those research and development facilities will require a much heavier usage of electricity than just a traditional warehouse where you're gonna come in and just drop your stuff and go. So that's what I mean with understanding the discrepancies or the differences between one asset class and the other one, because that is going to allow you to align yourself between your short and your long term. That's really going to set you up for making money much quicker. And the reason for that is because you're going to be able to understand which is a good deal from a bad deal. Now, right there on understanding your investment goals and after understanding what and clarifying what are your financial objectives, we go into risk tolerance assessment. So assessing your risk tolerance. So what the heck does that mean? That basically means and essentially is understanding how much money are you willing to lose if the investment that you made does not go right. Because when you're starting out and even when you have experience, sometimes investments don't go as you expect. Either there's information that you did not have, did not understand, did not get, were not able to comprehend, or something happened that made you lose on a profitable investment. So never invest more than you're willing to lose. Otherwise, you're going to be losing more than you can afford to lose. And essentially that means is if I only have $5,000 that I'm willing to lose, because if I lose $5,100, then that means I'm going to be missing out on having food on my table, then I'm only going to invest $5,000 because I could not go without eating. I need to sustain myself. So that's what assessing your risk tolerance means. And when you go into investments, that is from your pocket, your money side. You must also understand how much risk are you willing to take. Because the moment you start investing in things that you don't understand and you don't comprehend, you start increasing your risk for things to go south. And the more that you don't understand, the further down south things are going to go. Or the further down south, the possibility of things going south will have. So you must understand what is that perfect balance between the money you're willing to lose, the amount of knowledge that you have and don't have, and the amount of work that you're willing to do for that amount of knowledge that you don't have to make sure that your investment does come out profitable. And when you take into account how much money you're willing to lose on that investment and how much work and lack of knowledge you have, is when we get to the risk tolerance with that's when you align your risk tolerance with your investment strategy. And when you find that balance, you're going to be able to go into investments in a much safer way, and that's going to take out a lot of burden from you. So that's going to take us to the step number 2, which is the property selection criteria. And when we go into property selection criteria, we go and look at the location analysis and the property type consideration. So the first one, let's go ahead and start with the first one, okay? So when we go into the location analysis, there's two key points that we need to understand. So the first one is evaluating the neighborhood factors, and the second one is proximity to amenities and services. So they might sound very similar, however, they are not the same. Yet again, they do have some things in which they do entwine. So when we look at evaluating the neighborhood factors, is essentially what we're doing is evaluating what things does the community that we're investing in have and need, and what can we supply with our investment that they are lagging. Now, if we go into residential, it's pretty simple. If there's a lot of people looking for rentals, then we look to supply rents. If there's a lot of people looking to purchase, we look to supply houses so that they can go ahead and purchase. So that is just half of the equation, because the other half is also evaluating the proximity to services and amenities. So that means pools, schools, colleges, shopping centers, grocery shoppings. You know, if you want to start a theme park in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be much harder for you to get your construction equipment supplies to the middle of nowhere than if you start it near some place where there's actually development and there's already construction sites and there's suppliers for construction items. And if you're looking to provide rentals, then we must understand that there's the family structure. And when we look at the family structure, it's generally mother and father with kids. So if they have kids, they need to have good schools. If they don't have young kids, then they might need to look at colleges or whatever it is that they may need. At least over here in Puerto Rico, colleges are very close to the houses, so a lot of kids just stay with their parents and don't move out. But in the United States, I know it is quite different with colleges, a lot of the colleges having boarding rooms. So the analysis is slightly different over there. So understanding what amenities and what services can we provide to our potential tenants or buyers of our development properties is going to be a really important and key factor. Now, this also, understanding the neighborhood factors also include understanding the safety, the appeal, and the reason for people to move in and live in those communities, or for them to go work in those communities, whether you're looking at residential or commercial investments. So once we understand if it's a safe neighborhood, then it is going to be a lot more appealing for somebody to come in and rent and live in that safe neighborhood than a neighborhood which does not have those safety features. And we can keep on going and talking about neighborhood factors, given there's a lot of government subsidized aids for anybody looking to become an investor, and there are disserviced areas in the United States which do require additional servicing by investors, and the government does provide aids for whoever looks to service in those areas. But we're going to leave those for another video. So when we look at the second part is property type consideration. So when we look at investments, we need to look at residential and commercial investment. So if you notice, I've been dabbling between both residential and commercial throughout this whole video. And the reason for that is because if you're going to be investing as a resident, it's not going to be, or as a residential property, it's not going to be the same analysis as if you guys are going to be investing as a commercial investor. If you're looking at residential, you're looking at schools, you're looking at grocery shoppings, you're looking at colleges, you're looking at jobs that the people can find nearby, you're looking at safety factors, you're looking at how quick the police response times are, you're looking at how quick the fire department response times are, you're looking at all those factors. You're looking at growth in the city, because you don't just want to have a property that gives you monthly income, you also want to have a property that appreciates in value. So by looking at the yearly estimates of how has that city gone up in price, in value, we can calculate an estimate of how much we could expect for that property that you're investing in could appreciate. So that's a great key for when we look at residential. Now, when we look at commercial, it's going to be completely different, because commercial properties appreciate not based on location, but based on the income that they generate. And a lot of the income is going to be very based on what is nearby. If I have a piece of raw land right besides a place that's getting developed, then that piece of raw land is going to increase in value just because there isn't as much land. If you have a warehouse in a place where there isn't enough warehouses, you can increase rents. And given that you increase rents, you increase property value. Or by depreciating or decreasing, I should say, not depreciating, by decreasing your expenses on that warehouse, you get to increase the property valuation. In turn, you can sell it for much more money if you were to sell it, or you can take out a loan against that property for much more value than if you rent it for less. And that takes us to also exploring specialized properties, which are things like gas stations or research and development facilities. Those are typically single usage or very unique structures that will, cater to a very specific customer or very specific tenant or very specific buyer. So when we go ahead and look at those specialized properties, we're going to be able to see what is it that is so unique about that property, and if there's actually a need for that where I'm looking to invest. Because if there's no need for research and development facilities, why am I going to purchase one? Unless I foresee a research or a pharmaceutical company or some sort of company coming to whatever place that is. I'm not going to be investing into high risk properties if there isn't going to be a high reward, essentially. So that takes us to the financial analysis, because how do we identify what is a good investment from a bad investment? How do I know what's too much risk versus the reward I'm expecting to get? And for me, it's clear as day. If I can see myself making money easily on that deal, that's probably going to be a good deal. Now, that is only followed up by a good, thorough analysis, because seeing money in any deal is easy if you do the wrong analysis, if you overestimate your income, if you underestimate your expenses, if you overestimate your occupancy, if you underestimate the repairs and maintenance that you're going to have to do on that property. So these are just some 6 of the factors that you need to take into account when doing an investment. You also need to take into account how much knowledge you have for that specific investment. So that takes us to 7 different investment factors. So when we take all of those things into account, the first thing that we need to come up with is the purchase price evaluation, or just essentially how much can we afford to pay for that property where we're going to be profitable. So for that, we can determine the fair market value of the property. If we determine the fair market value of the property, well, that's what the market's willing to pay. And if we get the property at under market value, we're purchasing a property at a discount, which means I'm making money on the purchase I'm making. However, if I purchase at above the market rate, I am not going to be making money because, if somebody is willing to pay 100 grand for a property and I'm purchasing it for 125, I would need to sell it for 150 to just even break even with all the fees and costs and everything. Let's just say that we even make a profit at 150, but people are only willing to pay 100 grand. However, if I manage to snatch up that same property for even $80,000, then we can get that property for 80 grand and sell it. And after everything, we might be making 10 grand, which is a really good profit. So that is the importance of understanding the market value, the fair market value of a property. And then from there, that also applies to the rents, because if I purchase too expensive of a property and I pay a premium without there being any reason for me to pay a premium, then when I go to the market and offer my property for somebody to come lease it, they're not going to be willing to pay $1,500 for a place that's $1,000. They're not going to be willing to pay $3,000 for some place that's $1,500. So we need to make sure that the numbers that we write down on our investment analysis will actually conform to what the market is actually going for. So once we get to understand that, we're going to be able to start see the pathway towards becoming profitable in real estate investments. And the price that we get on our properties isn't just determined by analysis and mathematics and adding and subtracting and comps or comparables, but it's also going to be very dependent on you, because depending on how good of a negotiator you are, how good can you find what the seller, what the buyers, whoever is involved in deals wants from the deal, and you're able to satisfy the minimum needs, you're going to be able to get a much better deal where you're going to be able to make a lot more money. So it is very important to understand negotiating strategies, creative financing, creative ways to come up with down payment, closing costs. It's important to understand all of that and come up with very good offers so that everybody can become profitable in the business deal that you're doing. And for us to be able to get to the fair market, let's go ahead and circle back, because now the next two things that we're going to be talking about is the operating expenses and the income potential and cash flows. So this is going to help us a lot, because if I purchase a property that the market is willing to purchase for 150, but I find a tenant that's willing to pay me 10 grand a month for it, and they're selling to me for 200 grand. Yes, I'm paying a 5-month premium, but I get to make that 5 months, that $50,000 difference, that $50,000 premium in just 5 months. So there comes part of the analysis of weighing in my risk versus my reward, and how much money am I going to be able to make. And we're going to start off with the operating expenses, because every single property that we purchase is going to have some sort of operating expenses. And this is breaking down into two things. It is the identifying and estimating the ongoing costs and budgeting for maintenance and repairs. So what essentially that means is operating expenses are broken down into things: fixed things, line items that will always be the same and are just one-time thing, and then things that will eventually happen, so we need to prepare for those. So the ongoing costs are things like property taxes, water bill, electricity, HOAs, insurance, those are all of the things that are involved with the ongoing costs. With there comes the maintenance as well, because you need to take care of the lawn, you need to take care of the paint, you need to take care of the of everything. Well, the paint comes more as a maintenance repair, which goes under a different category from actual maintenance. But for those things, you need to go ahead and set a budget for the big maintenance and upkeep. So those are things like fixing the roof, fixing air conditioners, fixing plumbing, fixing electricity. And you need to set some money aside so that if any of those items ever fail or break down, you don't have to take money out of your pocket, but rather your investment is going to be able to pay for all of those things. And that is what it's actually going to turn into an actual investment instead of a horror and a nightmare. And the other thing that we need to understand is the income potential and cash flows for the property. So income potential is how much can that property make me, and the cash flows is how much is it actually making me. Because if our property isn't generating enough income to cover all of our expenses, then we're not being profitable. If our property is doing income, we need to understand from where, how can we increase it, and how can we make more money. So analyzing the rental income is finding ways for me to understand where is my money going to be coming from. Am I going to be making money just from the rents? Am I going to be able to have vending machines? Am I going to be able to have power washers and dryers, or not power washers, but clothes washers and dryers that people can pay, coin laundry space, essentially. Coin laundries where the tenants can use all of those things. Am I going to be having solar energy in my property, and am I going to be selling that solar energy to my tenants? Am I going to be having security services on property, which I'll be upselling to my clients? So those are all of the income sources that the property can or would have, depending on your asset class. And once we have that and we understand how much money can we actually make, we're going to understand our cash flow. Our cash flow is how much money we get every single month. From there, we need to subtract all of our expenses. Let's say if we have security guards, we need to subtract security guards. We need to subtract HOAs. We need to subtract every single item that will cost me money in that deal. We just had the light go out, so hopefully that doesn't happen for the next time. I've already actually ordered a brand new light, which will not be giving us issues. This one has been going out a few times, so apologize for that, guys, but we'll be doing better in the next couple of weeks. It's supposed to arrive in about a week or two, the new light. So, going back to the class of today, we're going to go into due diligence. So due diligence is understanding the property conditions, understanding what do I need to do to it once I purchase it, and what would I need to do to that property so that it is in good conditions. Will I need to do upkeep to it as soon as I purchase it, or is it ready to go? So there's two big things that we need to understand with the property inspection. So there's physical inspections, and then once we do the physical inspection, we need to understand what are the potential issues that this property could have. So if we see humidity on the walls, that might suggest that we might be encountering filtration. If we smell weird smells, funky smells on the air, that means we may have fungus on the walls, on the floors, all around. So we need to understand that, because if we purchase a property expecting to make $5,000 a month, and the property needs to be in good conditions for us to actually make that $5,000 a month, and the property needs an additional $50,000 in rehabs, that is gonna change our income projections. That's gonna change our return on investment, and that's gonna make it a lot harder for us to actually make our money. So we do a physical inspection of the property, analyzing what can potentially go wrong with it and what's potentially good with it. And there are property inspectors that you guys can hire for them to do that for you guys. You guys could also hire contractors for them to go ahead and see if there's anything wrong with the property. I always like using property inspectors because they just know a little bit, and then they'll guide me on whether I need to find somebody who's specialized on a specific subject or not. And then there's also the legal and zoning compliance. So if you purchase a commercial property, and this is going to be very dependent on where you live, in somewhere, and you want to have a usage of a residential property for that place, there are cities which are not going to allow you to turn a commercial property into residential or residential into commercial, and they're not going to allow you to rezone. There are properties or some pieces of land, at least where I come from, Puerto Rico, where if the land is zoned as agricultural, you're not going to be able to change that into a development zone. So if you plan to make a development in that piece of land and it's agriculturally zoned, then you're essentially just throwing your money away, because the use case for that property does not match the zoning and permits for that property. Yet again, there are places where you can actually do rezoning, like in Texas, where depending on the city, I know that some of my friends from investors from Texas, they purchase residential properties, they turn them into commercial, and then they make a nice chunk of money. I know that that also happens in some of the states. So it is very important for us to understand zoning and understanding the potential issues that might arise from the zoning issues or not arise. And that very much goes with ensuring the zoning compliance, which just means that the use case that you're going to use to give to the property matches the actual zoning permits. Let's see, reviewing legal documents. Make sure that all the documents that you have actually match what you're getting told. So a very, very curious story I want to share with you guys is a few years ago, I was working with this 400 acre piece of land, and one of my clients, a developer, wanted to purchase it to do a full-fledged development. It was probably going to be costing upwards of 150 million just to get started. The whole total cost would probably be about $1 billion here in Puerto Rico. The real estate agent that gave us the information for that land for us to offer it to our developer ended up making the mistake of not sending us the document for the zoning. And even though she knew that we were looking for a development zone and she claimed that the property was all great and it was good, she did not verify the permits or the zoning laws or regulations for that piece of land. And it was getting sold for a huge discount. I remember the price being about $5 million for 400 acres. And for Puerto Rico, that's cheap. I don't know about other states, but for Puerto Rico, that is very cheap. Once we started doing the due diligence and investigating why was this property actually getting sold, why can we get it? Can we build what we want to build? And we need to do that before going into a commitment, into a money commitment. Then we were able to find out that that property was zoned, first of all, agriculturally, so we could not do anything with it. Second of all, even if we were to be able to rezone it, the property had a special kind of tree, which we have here in Puerto Rico, called manglares. Those are federally and state protected trees, so we could not touch a very large portion of the land, which would encompass about 30 to 40%. Take on top of that the property was on a borderline protected zone. And essentially what that means is that the activists, because it was in a very close to activist zone area, would mean they would not be able to, they would probably come in and start boycotting the project. Sorry, I just got charged from Amazon a shit ton of money. So those are the lights. They're coming in. We're good to go, guys. So checking the zoning is going to be very, very important because that can save you guys or your clients a shit ton of money. In this case, the developer had already bought the tickets to come to Puerto Rico when we initially found the land, and after doing the full on due diligence, we had to notify the investor that, hey, you shouldn't come. You're just gonna waste your trip. You're just gonna waste your time, because we found out that the land is actually non-conforming with what we want to do. So that takes us to financing an investment structure, because every single investment is going to be very different. Uh, so for some properties, we're going to be able to do we're traditional financing, which is mortgage financing, talking with a bank who's going to lend you the money, give them down payment, closing costs, they give you the money, and then you start collecting rent or whatever you want to do with your property. However, there's also creative financing strategies such as getting money lent from family or relatives, hard money loans, equity line of credits, credit cards. There's hedge funds. There's a myriad, a huge array of loan options that you guys can do to finance your operations. And then there's the return on investment analysis, which is very, very simple. We're just going to go over this really quickly. Is calculating your ROI. So ROI means return on investment. So if I place $100 and I get $20, that means I made 20 out of 100, which is 20%. If I place $100,000 and I expect to make from rents net after all my expenses 20 grand, that means I'm making a yearly income of 20% on my investment. So it's going to take me 5 years to make all my money back. So, if you find a good deal where you're making 20%, that sounds like a really good deal, and I would go into it. If you find anything above 30, I personally love anything that's above 30, and that's just my personal preference. So that would really understanding what your risk tolerance goes hand in hand with understanding what your return on investment is. Because if your return on investment is too low, that means you're placing a lot of risk. Because the very second something goes wrong, you're not going to be able to make a profit or even break even. So let's say you're making 1% return on investment, and something breaks unexpectedly and you have to take money out of your pocket, then you're down to 0% return on investment, or possibly even -1 or 2% negative return on investment. Whereas if you are making a 10, 15, 20% return on investment, then you know that it doesn't matter basically what happens. You should have a very strong safety net for you to move around and do your moves and become successful in those investments. So calculating your ROI is very important, and then adjusting for optimal ROI. So if you have a large multi-family complex or office spaces, keeping the air conditioners on 24/7 is not optimal for your expenses. Shutting down at 6 or 7 p.m. and turning the air conditioners back at 5, 6, or 7 a.m. is going to help you optimize your electricity consumption and increase the income that you're going to be keeping to yourself. If you install energy efficient light bulbs and anything energy efficient on the property, you're going to be saving money on electricity. If you start monitoring all of those line items and adjusting, you're going to be able to increase your return on investment, thus making you a much better investor and much more profitable. And lastly is the exit strategy. So exit strategy essentially means, how am I going to make my big chunk of money? How am I going to make my money? Usually when you go into an investment, you already know how you are going to make your money before you go into that investment. And oftentimes an exit strategy is, how do I plan to dispose of this property, if I purchase this property, what is my intended use? And if I am going to sell it or dispose of it, even if I don't think I will, what would have to take place for me to be able to actually sell this? So if I purchase a commercial office and I know that I want to hold it for 5, 6, 7 years, which is pretty typical, and then sell it, what do I need to prepare during those 4, 5, 6, 7 years that I'm holding it so I can be profitable and make a good chunk of money when I sell it in my 7th year? Who do I need to start contacting in those years so that when I'm ready to sell, they're actually ready to purchase my property? How much money do I want to make? Do I want to make 1 million, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 million? Well, how much income do I need to get this property generating so that I can go ahead and sell it for those amounts? So that is essentially what's my exit strategy going to be. Or am I going to keep that property at the end of those 7 years and just keep it for the full term of the loan and maybe refinance or get a line of credit for that property so that I can take my money out of the property and into my pocket? So another very important thing from the very exit strategies is preparing for market changes, because the market changes every single year, every single month, every single week. And every couple of years, the market changes, and sometimes it happens that you prepare to sell at the 7th year, and instead of selling at the 7th year, you might need to sell at the 8th, 9th, or 10th year, because we had a market downturn for a couple of years, and then we need to wait for the market to go in an upwards curve so that we can actually sell at a much more profitable time. So we must also prepare for those market downturns or market changes, or to sell even before we're expecting to sell, just because those are opportunities that can cost us money out of our pockets or money into our pocket. So we've been here for 42 minutes, so I hope that you guys have liked this. In conclusion, the 3 main things that we've spoken about today have been the key steps in the property analysis. We've talked about making informed decisions, and we've talked about how to go in and out of our investment. So if you guys liked this tutorial, this video, please drop a like on this video, comment down below what you guys liked, what would you guys like for me to talk a lot more about, and feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and please subscribe, because I will be dropping down 365 videos for the next 365 days so you guys can actually learn how to grow and invest in real estate. So I'll see you guys in the next one.